Hey everyone, welcome back to Contractor Growth Network. I'm Logan Shinholser, and today I am joined by the co-founder of Estimate Rocket, Tom Droste. Tom, I appreciate you hopping on here, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing awesome, Logan. It's really great to be here. Totally enjoy it.
Well, I appreciate you hopping on here, and we're going to talk about probably one of the most important and least sexy, least appealing aspects of running a business, and that is going to be documentation
Mm.
and SOPs.
Yeah.
So before we jump into it, Tom, can you give me just a high-level overview of who is Tom and what is this Estimate Rocket?
Sure. So who is Tom is a really long question, but I am the co-founder of Estimate Rocket. I have had a lot of input into how the product was designed and works. I have a pretty heavy background in accounting prior to starting my software life, so a lot of what I do is I want to make sure that the numbers work at the end of the day, because if the numbers don't work, then they're kind of useless. So Estimate Rocket is an end-to-end software solution that enables service contractors to run their businesses efficiently, save some time and money so they can stop worrying about technology and start focusing on the customers and the work that matters.
Love it. All right, man. And we met last year at the Mile High Profit Summit with Reber, which we're going back to this year. Are you guys going back this year?
We'll see you there for sure.
All right. Beautiful. It's coming up soon. So let's go through the whole idea of documentation. Sure. Can you kind of start to just walk through, like, just first off, what is your take on the need to document what you're doing within the business?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that you don't know you need it until you need it. So it takes a backseat a lot of the time when we're busy and we're just trying to get a million things done. But it becomes critical as you grow and you've got more and more team members, and you have more and more things that don't happen all the time. They happen occasionally. The stuff you're doing every single day. Yeah. Everybody kind of knows those things. It's the things that don't happen every day. That's really why you need the SOPs or procedure documents or playbooks or whatever you call them. I'm kind of hyped up on the word playbook these days, but just because it has a little sports connotation to it. But it really is, if you want to grow, you have to have them. I mean, you just can't effectively do it if someone has to ask you the question every time they need to do something or know how to work on something or how to finish something or work with a customer. So they're really a critical piece of your corporate information.
So one of the things that you brought up was, as you're wanting to grow, are there certain inflection points or certain places within the life cycle of the business that you're like, okay, it's no longer just me, it's time to do it? Or maybe it is when it's still just you, you got to do them. I guess, when do we need to really start to take this documentation thing seriously?
Yeah, I guess I would have to say it's when you first start thinking that you might have to hire someone, that you need to start thinking in terms of, okay, if I hire someone, how are they going to help me? And if the answer to that is, I'm going to have to sit there and piece by piece explain every single thing to them, then you're in trouble, because that is going to defeat the purpose of this great person that you're bringing in onto your team that's supposed to help unload some things from you, so you can do some other things that you need to that only you can do. So it really is, it's probably prior to that first hire. When you start thinking, I'm going to hire, you got to start thinking, okay, well, how am I going to train this person or teach this person and get them to know what we know?
Yeah, it's funny, like with that last piece of like get them to know what we know, like I always forget how much I actually know about a very specific topic. Even if somebody comes in, let's say like just the world of sales and like, selling what we do to a residential contractor.
Right.
I have somebody who comes in with, more sales experience than I have years on this earth.
Right.
Yet I know a lot more about how to sell this one specific thing compared to them, because I've just had so much practice. And I'm like, oh shoot, I totally forgot. When they say retail, this is really what they mean. This is not like, you're going to Dillard's. This is something, they're going direct to consumer.
Right.
So those little nuances. And I think that's the biggest thing is, so right now at CGN, we're doing a lot of documentation. So one of the things that really, I guess, has held me back in the past of doing it was, one, just a lack of understanding of why we need it, but two, just feeling like, well, a lot of the things that I do is nuanced, and there's no way that I can actually document the nuances of the business. Right. Am I often saying that?
Not at all. Not at all. And in fact, one of the, it's sort of related. I work with I get coaching from a company called SaaS Academy. And Dan Martell, who runs SaaS Academy, he has a few really strong tenets. One of them is about the playbooks. And his thing is that to create a playbook, you should always have a video. And the video is you doing whatever it is you're trying to document and narrating it as you go. And it's a beautiful thing because it does allow you to get some of the nuance and the things in there that you would, maybe not every detail every time, but enough that the person listening to it is going to say, oh, that's a question mark. That's something I probably need to get more detail on. So 100% of what you're doing, it's really hard to capture. And the reality is you capture it today and next week it's already outdated, right? So we know these procedures, playbooks, whatever, are going to be a constantly evolving thing in your company because your company is going to be constantly evolving. But it still matters that you get some core of that down so people have some idea of what the process looks
like. And just a side note, I'm actually on chapter 6 of Buy Back Your Time.
Awesome book. Yeah.
So what, just so everybody knows, what Tom's talking about is the owner and the mastermind group that he's in wrote this book called Buy Back Your Time. And this is probably the third, time blocking, all that stuff book. And I would say that the thing that really made me start to want to read it was he made a comment on a podcast I was listening to that he said, everybody wants to go out and hire the COO because they think they have all these operations issues, but in reality, they don't even have an assistant. So they don't need a $300,000 COO. What they really need is first to get those low level tasks off their plate. And that's when I was like, wow, there's an actual structure to buying back your time versus just offloading all your crap without any sort of rhyme or reason. So
it's fascinating.
Interesting. All right. Love it. Yeah. I mean, it's been great. I've been doing a chapter a day. So I'm just early on, but I'm stopping and implementing each thing. So I'm currently on week 2 of tracking every single half an hour of what I'm doing with my time.
Awesome.
So
that's an eye opener.
Little by little getting there. It is shocking about how much minutia that you do, where I'm just because historically I would just look at it as admin work, but then I start to realize okay, admin specific to this. And then, so one of the things that we're doing here at our company is everybody documented their full week, every half an hour as a whole. And then the next piece is breaking down each of the different processes that we're doing and being able to articulate it. And what a lot of people are finding, including myself, is a lot of the ways that we're going about doing certain things. When you stop and look at it and explain it to somebody else, you realize, oh, wow, that is not the most efficient way to do it. What can I do to restructure this same thing? And I started doing that. And some of the work that I have to do, it's cutting down by about 40% of the time that it normally takes simply by stopping and going, let me redo the order in which I'm doing this in. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It's so nice.
Yeah, it is. And it is tough because it can be daunting when if you wait too long, it can be super daunting to try to capture all this stuff. But, if you are in that situation, plow through, get it done. Then you can use that as a guideline for change. At least you've got that. You can review it with people, figure out, and as other people look at it, they're going to find nuances because their workflow based on their time allocation may be completely different than yours is. So they may come back and say, hey, is it okay if I do it in this order? And you go, yeah, sure. That fits your model. Great. Let's just put it in the playbook.
So what are some of these pieces that the clients that you work with, cause this whole audience is mostly residential contracting company owners. What are some of those documentation pieces that people should really start to think about as far as getting this down on paper? So maybe somebody else on the team can pick up where they left off.
Yeah, I think it's really important to start with some of your basic core processes, not even necessarily in light of trying to offload from yourself, but you need to have your basic sales process outline. And again, this doesn't have to be every detail of every single thing you do, but it needs to be sort of hey, these are the steps when we go from getting a lead till we make them a customer or we close our first deal with them or something along those lines. And then there may be another playbook for ongoing follow-up, that gets into more of the marketing playbook of how do we get the leads and then nurture them, and then how do we keep them coming back, year over year over year. So getting just those basic things down in writing is a big help, I think. Then you can start to get more specific, because if you don't have the main processes, and then we go to the work process, what does a job look like from the time it gets accepted till the time the final invoice is paid? Again, series of steps that, this is not that complicated. It's just a matter of taking the time and sitting down and trying to think about, okay, what are all the material steps that I'm going to have to get from starting point to ending point? Then you can get into the more nuanced things, I think.
So when you're looking at documenting something, or you're talking, let's say a client calls you up and says, hey, Tom, I'm dealing with this issue. Do you have like an approach or a methodology as far as like how to come up with what your sales process looks like? Because I know one of the things that I used to struggle with a lot is like, I would want to do all the nitty gritty at every single step. Right. And it would just felt so overwhelming that I would end up killing it on step 1, and then steps 2 through 9 never got done.
Right. Again, it's just, I think the key is to do the simple outline first, get that down without really diving into every individual element. Then it's much easier to go back and start filling in the blanks, because the things will come to you once you get that outline done. But if you get hung up on step 1, as you say, you just never get through it. And that's hard. It really is, especially, if you're 1 or 2 people in the company, you're super, super busy. You have no time for anything. It's like, oh, why am I going to sit down and write this stuff out? Well, you're going to do that. So eventually you can be 3 or 4 or 10 or 50 people, and you'll have these playbooks for your team to use, and everybody will be on the same page doing things the same way.
How, within Estimate Rocket, how have you gotten buy-in for your team to also document what they're doing? Or is it all just Tom creating everybody's systems and processes for them?
No, I try not to do that, actually. It's really, if you don't, get the processes mapped out, and individuals, at our stage are constantly having to do their own new playbooks for new things, or, update the existing playbooks. That's a tough one too. You go back and look at oh God, we have 100 playbooks. We should really review those once a year and go through them and say, is this still relevant? Have the steps all changed? I think the buy-in comes, the biggest buy-in comes when you get somebody new, because you have pieces to give to these folks that they can use as reference and get up to speed much quicker than you having to take 4 or 5 of your days out just to talk through this stuff that really is done all the time and should be done the same way by everybody, or within the same parameters. I think that's the buy-in, is when you realize how much easier it's going to be to have new people come into your team.
So who then creates these? I guess, like, are you asking the team to create them? Are you saying, and if that's the case, like, hey, this is how you should approach it? I guess, how does the rest of the people create them? That's not just Tom doing it.
Sure. Same process. I mean, if it's their process and they're working it, they may take, if there's an existing one, great. If it's a new process that's kind of spawning off of an existing process or getting elaborated on, for example, those first outlines may be fairly terse, not a lot of detail in them. They may say, hey, look, this is really 20 steps. This needs to become its own process. And because they're the folks doing it, I'll say, hey, go, create the process for it. We can review it and talk it through, but you're doing it. If you got to train someone else on it, that's your thing. You want it to be in the way you're doing it, as long as they're fitting into, following the core values and not branching out in a crazy way about it. But I think they need to do their own.
And are you putting this all into like a legal pad? Do you have like a software that you use that you track it? I guess, what is the actual like vehicle to getting this down?
Yeah, we're currently doing it in Google Docs. However, we're starting to migrate it into Basecamp, using Basecamp's
Okay.
project management for it. It's a pretty good tool for that.
So if you were a contractor and you're wanting to, like, look, I got to get this thing going, I guess, how would you go about, or what advice would you give them to go through the actual
Hmm.
documentation and creation of this, recognizing it's not going to be perfect at the beginning,
Sure.
and maybe you don't know how to use Basecamp,
Right.
but at least you got something down.
Yeah.
I guess, what would you talk to them about?
I mean, I would probably point them to something like Google Docs, which is an accessible a repository that's accessible by your team so people can get to it. Because the playbooks aren't really of any use if you're the only one that can get to them. We need to get them out, and the team members need to be able to see the appropriate things for their teams. So, you can start with a simple Google Doc. I mean, that they do a great job of outlines and easily accessible. And ultimately, what you do in Google Docs, if you do want to migrate into some project management, and there are some, and I'm not going to remember any of the names right offhand, but there are actually some dedicated procedure and SOP applications out there that are available as well, that are just designed for that. They get in a little bit more to versioning, so you can track, what the process used to be, what does it look like now. But you can actually even do that in Google Docs as well. And in some cases, something like Basecamp, or the other thing that's handy is to actually create, if you're going to use the Google Suite here, is to create a Google spreadsheet that basically is just a list of all your documents with a link to them. So you can have a nice text name that says, hey, here's your sales procedures, and there's 10 of those, and here's your marketing, here's your tech support, or your customer service or whatever, here's another 10. And that way you've got almost like an index to them. So you use that as your index into your specific documents. And then those links actually can be used in the future to go, you could host those in a Basecamp or some other type of application like that as well.
So you're essentially creating like a library for this stuff, but you're having that one main,
Yeah.
You go to the mall and you can get to the Apple store by wandering around,
Right.
or you can just look right at the map and you're right there.
Yeah, you got to have the card catalog there so you can click it, search it and click it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Nice. All right. What is one final thing that you would like to talk about pertaining to the documentation SOP thing that we haven't talked about yet, that you really feel people should know, either as they're creating them or before creating them, or they have them done and now they're trying to figure out how to really use them and leverage them?
Yeah. Make them relevant when you're building them. In other words, and I'll go back to not overdoing it in your first pass. Get the core concept down, and don't be afraid you're not doing a good procedure because it's not, perfect. Get it down and then refine it. So you got to go through a refining process rather than trying to nail it the first time. Even in Dan's book about doing his playbooks, he talks about making your videos. He says, but you need to do 3. By the 3rd time, you got it down. So it's not a one and done. It's a process. It's done. That's one of your first SOPs. Review the SOPs.
Yeah, it really is. And we'll link to the book in the show notes of this.
Yeah,
So if people
cool.
are wondering, like, what is this Dan guy
Really good
that we
book.
keep talking about?
Yeah.
It's fantastic. So, Tom, how can people get in contact with either you or Estimate Rocket to learn more about what you bring to the industry?
Sure. You can email me anytime, Tom at Estimate Rocket. You can also go to our website. If you have any interest at all, I highly recommend signing up for a live product walkthrough, where in like 30 to 40 minutes, we kind of really show you what it can do for you. So that's probably the best. Just estimaterocket.com and click the sign up for a demo sign.
Cool. Tom, I appreciate you coming on here, man. This is one of those topics that nobody is like itching to like, let's do it. But everybody, they want it done. It's like dieting, man. Like nobody wants to diet, but everybody wants the body that it comes with a diet.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you, Logan.